Work session. I'll turn it over to Council Vice President. President McCarty will be here shortly, but the city's running just a little bit late. So, Mr. Allen.
Okay, we're going to have a presentation, a discussion on a draft report for the Corn Palace remodeling project. So I'll turn that over to you, Stephanie.
I won't have much to say other than our committee met, boy, it's been probably 2 weeks ago now when the work session was scheduled. The idea was we'll have them come in, present the draft report, give an opportunity for council to see any things that might have been missed or ask any questions before we go and finalize the report. So this is still in draft status, so we could still have some modifications made, but I don't have anything else other than just introduce our, is it not working? You don't have, oh, sorry. As much as I say everyone should talk into the microphone and then I wasn't. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Robin from Shamrock Associates.
Thank you. And thank you, City Council. We appreciate the opportunity to come present this today. I'd like to say that it was last summer we got a request for proposals submitted on this project, and through the interview process we're selected, and we thank you for that. It was around October, the end of October, when we first met, had our first meeting where we spent a 2-day session talking through kind of the wants and needs of what you like about the Corn Palace, what might be missing in the Corn Palace, what you'd like to see in a new or renovated or upgraded Corn Palace. We started with, and I'd like to just say that on your desk is a draft written report, but we'll be giving you more because we can do more in three-dimensional and in motion slides down the road. So this is a place where you can take away with you, and if you'd like to take notes along the way. But a little bit on the, it would be the very first page, gives you an idea of the design team, and underneath is what we were tasked to do. So our contract had a series of line items: more event space, square footage, and flexibility, additional seating, replace all of the seating, but up to 5,000 was, I think, later expressed as a want. Mechanical and electrical needs, both of those systems we discovered are extremely dated and in need of repair or replacement. Improved service entry, concessions and restrooms, full-time separate gift shop space, 2 additional multi-purpose rooms, locker, meeting, green room kind of spaces, main floor storage, and box seats and flexible space. As we went into the project, the first 2 days we were here, we had the opportunity to meet with roughly 50 people. At the end of those 2-day sessions, as we were gathering information on page 3, it's a summary. I took 16 pages of notes. I just went through and randomly grabbed on page 3 some of the notes that I thought were somewhat significant or were common statements that were made by the various groups and came and talked to us. The executive team, tourism, community members, athletics, investors for the community, facility users and operations were the primary groups of people that met with us. At the end of that time, we hosted an open house charrette session with groups of people that could come and join us. As we gathered that information, we were early on able to do some, give you an idea, there's our time frame where we are today. From project kickoff information gathering, stakeholder input, that's what I was just talking about, grabbing the information from all the users and people that have interest in the Corn Palace. We then came back with another 2-day charrette, worked through design options, another 2-day charrette where we developed those farther, and today where we are now, the draft review, with the goal of refining, like Stephanie said, any comments, questions, anything we might have missed, so that we can put that into the final draft, and you hopefully will be able to select one final solution to pursue. So in this process, David Greisel is with us today. He'll be able to explain the process a little bit better, but or in more detail. But we started with that team gathering information, and from there we developed a series of 5, maybe even a little bit more than 5, but we numbered plans 1 through 5. And at the last couple meetings, we narrowed it down. We're now down to 3. And for some strange reason, we renumbered 1 through 5, the 3 that were selected A, B, C. So eventually we'll get to A, B, and C. And at this point, there's I don't know that there's a proven one that's ahead or anything, but that's for you guys to take a look at and challenge us on. So with that, I think, David?
Okay. So I think, good evening. My name is David Greisel, principal with Convergence Design. Very pleased to be working with Shemmer on this project, and very excited to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Jack, I think the next couple of slides just show some illustrations from our Schemmer's.
I was just going to ask,
Sorry.
or if, obviously we selected you guys for a reason, and I want, maybe, could you just explain some of the larger projects that you have personally worked on in the past, and so we can kind of identify why you guys were kind of set apart from the others that we interviewed?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Convergence Design is a specialist sports and public assembly architecture firm. We're located in Kansas City, Missouri. Basically,
Sorry, making sure YouTube was going.
public assembly buildings is really all we do. We're working right now on a 6,000-seat event center in Clarksville, Tennessee. We've done arenas, arena remodels. We've done stadiums, ballparks, and convention centers literally all over the country. I was with another firm. I was the lead designer for PNC Park, home of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Minute Maid Park, home of the Houston Astros. So, and my resume in public assembly architecture goes way, way, way back, almost 40 years. So. This is kind of where we live, and we're very excited to have the opportunity to work on a historic building like the Corn Palace. Is that good? Okay. So anyway, we did this very elaborate 3D building scan, so we now have a 3D model of the existing building that is super detailed, data cloud with billions of points in it that we can use to develop further architectural drawings when the project comes to that. And then in the lower left on this slide, you see one of those architectural drawings that comes out of a BIM, Building Information Modeling model that was created from the 3D point cloud. So that kind of shows the evolution of that process. Go to the next slide. This is a longitudinal section of the Corn Palace. The upper image is the point cloud, and then the lower image is the section model that was generated from that. Robin, would you hand me a water bottle, please? Thank you. Okay, so as Robin mentioned, as part of our information gathering process, we met with a whole bunch of stakeholders here in this room over a period of a couple of days, and these next couple of slides are just a brief recap of kind of what we learned from all those conversations. So, as Robin said, he took 16 pages of notes. I think I did too. So we've got lots and lots of documentation, but these bullet points are kind of the distilled down version of what we heard. And these are things that we heard over and over again. So I'll just kind of briefly review these with you. We heard that the current seating that's fixed on the east side of the basketball court is not really working. It's too narrow, it's too tight, the sight lines aren't good, and I can confirm as an architect who works on these kinds of buildings all the time that all those statements are true. The spacing is too tight and the sight lines are definitely not good for basketball. There's a stated need for more flat floor space in the main event hall. Right now you basically have one full-size basketball court plus a fairly substantial margin around the edge, but that's really all you have. So we're looking at ways to increase that. Not only to have more courts for tournaments and practice, but also to just simply have larger events in the space. And you'll see in a minute how much larger that could be. There was a stated need, which we completely endorse, for permanent retail space for Corn Palace souvenirs. Because as you know, right now, when you set up a souvenir shop in the summer, you don't have your event floor anymore. You've got a nice big souvenir shop, but you don't have an event floor. So we'd like to create a permanent space for retail so that you can still use the event floor year-round. There's a lot of interest in keeping the Armory gym if that's possible. And we heard a lot that the locker room layout from the more recent 90s edition at the east side of the building isn't really working very well from a functional standpoint. Not working very well may be a nice way of putting it. And we heard a lot, interestingly, we showed a lot of people this photograph from 1923 and got a lot of real positive feedback on that photograph that, there was a sense of energy and excitement in that photograph of the way the people are so much closer to the court. And the question was, can we make the Corn Palace feel more like it felt in 1923 in that photograph? So we're going to show you some ways that we think we actually can capture that kind of energy and excitement. Next, please. Some other discussion points. The possibility was raised that in order to make the Corn Palace function like it needs to function, that city offices might need to move somewhere. And for the most part, we heard very little opposition to that. There are other programmatic needs, which I'm not going to go into great detail on, having to do with storage and the ability to provide what we call spectator amenities, restrooms, and concessions. And a lot of conversation around premium seating options. Premium seating options simply means that, in addition to regular, folding chairs, uprising armchairs like you would have in a stadium or an arena, there's also opportunities for things like suites or loge boxes or club seats or club lounges that relate to club seats, or just in any professional venue, there are multiple tiers of seating options in terms of price point and the quality of the environment that's provided. In some cases, the quality of the food service that's provided, it also varies by the price tier that you're at, which can potentially drive significant revenue to the bottom line. So the reason why venues do these premium seating options is to improve their bottom line, and so we want to at least explore the possibility of premium seating in the renovation of the Corn Palace. As Robin mentioned, our target was 5,000 seats, although everybody recognizes that's sort of a soft target. It's not an absolute, and you'll see how close we got to that on some of these. And there was a very, very, very strong bullet point about preserving the corn murals. That's that's non-negotiable, both inside and out. Although we did make the point that the inside corn murals may move somewhere else after the building is remodeled. They may not be in the exact same location they are now. But we definitely want to have a space for corn murals both inside and outside the building. The likelihood is the outside corn murals won't move at all. They'll probably just stay exactly where they are. Next, please. Definite need for technology upgrades throughout the building, having to do with not only things like Wi-Fi, but also things like LED signage and scoreboards and ribbon boards, and modern arenas are full of lots of gee-whiz technology, and so it's important to get at least some of that into the budget for the remodeling. The idea of, we talked about the inadequacy of the locker rooms, creating locker space that allows you to host tournaments here, which means having a number of adequately sized locker rooms that would allow tournament teams to use the facility on kind of a rotating basis and get teams in and out efficiently. Multi-use was emphasized over and over again, that it is certainly a basketball facility, but it's not just a basketball facility. We also want to be able to do concerts in here. We want to be able to do tournaments as well as competition basketball and volleyball and other sports like wrestling, dance, cheer, gymnastics, judo, you name it. There's quite a number of sports that could happen in here, as well as banquets and other flat floor events like exhibitions and things like that. Modernize the back of house. There's a lot of functional technical issues with the back of house that need to be addressed, and our renovation plans will address most of those. And we want to look at the approach and how people come to this building, knowing that the front door is always going to be on Main Street. The question is, as this building transitions from a roughly 2,700 seat venue to maybe a 5,000 seat venue, is there a need for another main entrance? And we think the answer to that is yes. So that's a real quick recap of kind of what we heard from the stakeholders, and that was sort of our marching orders going forward into the charrette that Robin mentioned. So next slide. In December, we held this charrette here in this space where we developed a great number of options. You can see, I think, 5 options on the wall there, and through discussion with the stakeholders that were involved in that charrette, we narrowed it down to 3, which are the 3 options we're going to show you tonight. So let me pause and take a breath there and just see if anybody has any questions before we jump into the options. Okay. All right. Well, let's forge ahead. So as Robin said, we relabeled them A, B, and C because I didn't want to show you 1, 4, and 5. So. So option A is what we call our budget-priced option. Not that it's cheap, but it's the cheapest of the 3 that you're going to see. And the sort of overriding principle of option A is to keep the building footprint more or less intact. So this is truly a renovation project in the sense that we're not adding any square footage to the building. What we are doing is substantially modifying the current seating bowl, which if you can see that sort of faint arc on the event floor. That arc kind of represents the front edge of your current western seating bowl. And what we're proposing is to completely remove those curved fixed seats on the west side of the building and replace them with a sort of a 50-50 fixed and retractable bank of seating that would be straight line, so it would run parallel to the competition baseline. And it would be, at least the first half of it would be fully retractable to increase the size of the event floor. So you can see in this sketch, there are now 2 practice courts where before there was just the 1 tournament court. There's now 2, and so we've increased the size of the event floor to about 17,000 square feet in this, which is a substantial increase from where you are now. We're also, when we demolish the fixed seating, we also, by a necessary consequence, would also demolish a lot of the concession stands that are under it now. So those would be substantially remodeled as well, or basically built new. But the basic layout of the West Concourse doesn't change a whole lot. You still have the restrooms outboard near Main Street. You still have the concession stands inboard near where the seating is. And you still have what essentially amounts to a U-shaped circulation pattern where people enter the event space on the north and south, although you'll see in a minute that we're planning to take a lot more people upstairs than you currently do. Then the purple area in the upper part of this diagram, I should use my little pointer. The purple area in the upper part of this diagram is the new permanent retail space that is basically where we're standing right now. So city offices, in this scenario, city offices would be relocated to the 2nd and 3rd level, and the 1st level would be given over to retail on the front, and then back of house functions on the back, basically storage and service for the event center itself, which are woefully inadequate in the current configuration. And then the locker room building on the east side of the building in this scenario is substantially remodeled. That is to say, it's basically gutted and rebuilt to create a more functional flow, what we call a talent corridor running all the way north and south so that you can enter the event floor from either the north end or the south end. But the stage house would stay pretty much in place, and so those retractable seats on the stage would essentially stay more or less as they are in this scenario. Robin, can I have one of those? In the, it's hard for me to read the small numbers here, but let's go to the next slide, Jack. So this shows the seating layout for option A, and what you get is in this one, we're proposing that the tournament court, the competition court actually would orient east and west, and you would have substantial amounts of retractable seating on both the north and south sides, as well as about a 50-50 split on the west side, and of course the east side stays more or less like it is, which gets you a net capacity of around 2,700 seats. So interestingly, not a whole lot more than you have now, but we think the quality of the viewer experience would be much better here because the seats are all going to be closer to the floor with better sight lines, and presumably more comfortable seating, with better aisle spacing and things like that. So even though the total numbers don't change much, we think it would be a much better spectator experience in option A. So that's a quick look at option A.
So David, just
Yes.
to pause you just a second.
No problem.
Obviously, we said upstairs moving the offices, so the basketball court up in the armory would then be replaced by, there would be 2 courts, so
Right.
so it'd be a net of 0.
Right. You would
At-
still
at
have
this
2
particular-
courts. They would just both be at the event level of the current facility, and the Armory Court would become city offices on the second floor. I think most all of us would recognize that's maybe a suboptimal solution, losing the Armory Court, but it's sort of a consequence of this option staying within the existing building footprint. Okay? So, good question. So let's, sure.
One question to confirm. In option A, the roof line stays as is,
In
correct?
option A, the roof line stays exactly as it is. The building, well, in fact, we'll see in a minute. So we've developed a 3D model of all 3 options, and this is option A, and Jack Gonzalez, my associate running the technology, is going to orbit us around this a little bit and kind of show you what's going on here. So this is a cross-section now through the space, and you can see the east-west oriented tournament court. You can see the fairly substantial amount of fixed seating on the west side, and then the existing bleachers more or less as they are on the east side, with much bigger seating sections on the north and south, obviously, because we turn the court 90 degrees. So Jack, let's do that plan cut thing. So what's nice about this model is we can look at it from literally any angle. Okay, so now we're kind of looking down on the event space, and this gives you an idea of how different, I think very different, the event space would feel from the way it feels now with the court running east and west. Over here is the retail space, and then the back of house space on the back side of the existing building. And the way this is cut, we're just above the roof of the lockers, so you're seeing the existing locker room building pretty much as it is in terms of the roof line. They would be preserved. Oh, the one thing I didn't mention was the second floor. So. Yeah, and unfortunately, this one doesn't show the vomitories, so that's probably not a great way to talk about it. We'll talk about that in option B. So we'll get to that. Okay, so let's continue on. So our next option is option B, which follows directly after A. So some significant departures in option B. The most significant being that we're adding footprint. We're adding footprint on the east side of the building, and we're also adding footprint by proposing a new structure be located on the current north parking lot that would hold all the city offices, so that frees up the current City Hall building for use by the Corn Palace, which functionally we feel actually will work much better. So this again shows the permanent retail located on Main Street, facing Main Street, that little purple rectangle there. In this case, the locker rooms have been relocated to what is now City Hall on the first floor. with a talent corridor that runs north and south and then dumps you into this corridor, which would take you directly into the event space. And then there's some additional space on the back of City Hall for loading and service so that we can load City Hall, load the Corn Palace off of 7th Street into a loading and marshaling area, which is something that you don't really have now, which will greatly improve the functionality of the back of house. I think having all of this space as back of house space will be a tremendous advantage for the Corn Palace. We're also proposing, again, in this scenario, demolishing the current stage house and the current locker room facility and replacing it with what will essentially be a mirroring facility, which you'll see in a second how that works as far as the seating layout, where the center court becomes the competition court, and you now see that there are now 3 courts on the event floor. So the event floor has expanded to roughly 22,000 square feet, which is a substantial increase over where I think it's roughly double what you have now. So you now have 3 practice courts here, plus the additional court at the Armory, which would give you a total of 4 in the building. And then you can see we've kind of replicated the public space that's on the west side of the building on the east side of the building with a new entry that this entry would face north into a landscape pedestrian plaza that would extend to the corner of 7th and Lawler. The idea being that there's already a substantial amount of surface parking to the north and to the east of this building, and that having a new entry at the northeast corner would actually be a great convenience for people who are parking in those areas, not having to walk all the way around the building to get to the west door. So what we're showing is a kind of a tall 2-story entry that would let you into a 2-level concourse. This is the ground level part of the concourse with concessions and toilets. And then you can see the event floor with the 22,000 square feet, and these gray bars are the retracted telescoping seats. So in this view, they're retracted so that you can see the whole event floor. So let's go to the next level. So this is the second level plan of option B, and here you can see the seating pulled out. You can see that we now have this yellow rectangle is a 360-degree public circulation route that goes all the way around the event floor at the second level, and this is where I was going before. Our idea is to try to push as many spectators as possible up to this second level and feed the seating bowl through what we call vomitories, which are simply holes in the seating bowl that allow you to walk through. So you would land right at the middle and either go down or up to your seat, if that makes sense. It's very common in the stadiums to enter through a vomitory and then either go down to your seat or turn around and go back up to seats above you. But this will actually make the seating much easier to traverse for spectators. They won't feel like they're having to climb quite as far if they're in the upper part of the venue. And I think even more importantly, from an operational standpoint, it gets spectators off the event floor during events so that you can actually maintain a semblance of security at the event floor and keep the spectators separate from whatever teams or whatever is happening at the event level. So there's a lot of advantages to this. Also, you have concessions and toilets at this level, so people don't have to go downstairs if they want to get a soda or some popcorn. You can see in this plan the Armory is still the Armory, so we're keeping that space, and basically our proposal is to just simply renovate the Armory so that the HVAC works properly and so forth, so it's more usable space. But in terms of architecturally, there's not a whole lot that needs to be happen there, except maybe the creation of some permanent bleachers in there to more formally recognize the spectator function in there, although it would be a very small number of seats, probably only about 100 seats. So let's see. One other thing on this level is this purple space here. We talked before about premium seating. This purple space would be a club lounge, as we're calling it, that would have a view of the event floor. where you could have VIP, hang out. You could have, higher ticket price for people to be able to access the club lounge, and higher level of food and beverage service if you want to go there, and be able to at least see the event floor. It wouldn't be a great place to watch the game, but it would be a great place to hang out and sort of keep your eye on the game while you're in there, if that makes sense. Okay. And then the third page of option B is just simply a seating plan, which shows you that in option B, we are now at about 4,200 seats. So this is getting much closer to the 5,000 seat target. And you can see it's a very symmetrical seating plan, that you have large blocks of seats on the east and west side of the court, much smaller blocks of seats on the north and south side of the court, which, again, I want to point out to you, really captures that energy from the 1923 image of fans being right at courtside and going up from there, and fans in the end zone. We're actually proposing reintroducing the balcony seating that was in the end zones originally. What you see here is it would actually be cantilevered balcony seats that would come off the second floor walkway and hang out, not literally over the court, but hang out very close to the baseline. So the sight lines might not be the best, but it would certainly provide some very excellent energy for spectators in the venue. So Jack, why don't we go to the 3D model now for option B and zoom around that a little bit. Hang on while Jack gets all the pieces and parts turned on. Okay, well let's go ahead and look at the plan cut while we're here. So this is kind of cut halfway through the second level, so you can see the second level concourse on both the east and west sides of the building. And then you can see how those second level concourses lead you to vomitories that take you right out to the seating bowl at kind of a midpoint, so you can either go down or up to reach the seats. Also in this view, you can see that in addition to those cantilevered balcony seats I was just talking about, we still have a few rows of retractable seats at the ground floor level. So we've actually got the two levels of spectators that you had in that 1923 photograph. And then this, because we're looking at the second floor here, this shows the Armory basketball court pretty much intact. So Jack, go ahead and flip us around so we're looking at that north entry. I think that would be fun to do. So this is now looking at it from the northeast, and that kind of portal you see there would be the entry on the northeast corner of the building, with the landscape pedestrian plaza out in front of it that I was describing to you. And then this entry takes you to a grand stair that, can you come up top a little bit, Jack? Yeah, so there's this grand stair that takes you up to the second level and lands you on this second level concourse. So you can see that in this scenario, it's easy to imagine half the spectators or more than half the spectators coming in this north entry, flowing up the stairs to this concourse, which would actually be a little bit more spacious than the one on the east side, because we're building it, sort of custom for this application, not having to adapt a 1921 building to make it work. And then the second level concourse wraps all the way around 360 degrees so that anybody can get to any seat in the building at this level without having to go back down to the event level, if that makes sense. Okay, and then and then the loading dock I was talking about would be right here in this little niche of a little chunk of new space, basically just for loading. Okay, so let's flip around and show them the cross section. I love how this works. Okay. So what we're proposing in option B and also in option C is a couple of things. One is right now you have an acoustical tile ceiling that runs along the bottom plane of the trusses that hold the roof up. We're proposing eliminating that acoustical tile ceiling and exposing the structural steel trusses that hold the roof up, as well as the wood deck that spans between the trusses that the roof is actually installed on, for a couple of reasons. One is we think just adding that volume will be a tremendous improvement to the quality of the experience of the space. We all think it will, we don't think it will be an acoustical detriment. We actually think it will be an acoustical benefit, because we're A, increasing the volume, and B, although we're getting rid of an acoustical ceiling, we're exposing a wood deck that will have very similar acoustical properties to the acoustical ceiling we're taking out. So we actually think the acoustics will be better, or at least not worse, by getting rid of that acoustical ceiling, and the visual of the building will be much, much better. Because it's going to look more like an arena, if you will, and without that 2x4 lay-in tile ceiling. The second thing you'll notice is that the new part of the building, which basically starts roughly right here at the front edge of these seats, that the trusses in the new part of the building match the trusses in the old part of the building. So we're proposing the same roof profile would go all the way to Lawler Street, and we would match the profile of the trusses. Now, they won't exactly match. You won't get all the same rivets that you have in the old 1921 trusses, but the profile of the trusses will be the same. Hopefully the color will be the same, so it will look consistent from one end of the building to the other. The one thing you won't have, and Jack, can we zoom in a little bit? One thing you won't have is you won't have these columns that currently exist standing free of the exterior wall by about 6 or 7 feet. That's where the columns that hold up the old trusses are. I'm not sure why they did that exactly, except they didn't want that thrust to be on the exterior wall, but we can obviously design a truss that bears on a column that's embedded in the wall. So the new part will not have the freestanding columns, but it will have the same exact shape as the current trusses, if that makes sense. But we'll get rid of the freestanding columns so we don't have to deal with that impediment to our circulation. Does that all make sense?
This is just going to be in B and C, right?
Yes.
This won't be in A, just B and C.
Not in B and not in A, because in A we're not really adding any new space. So all that doesn't apply. But in B and C you get the same profile trusses, you get the acoustical ceiling, and the acoustical ceiling can go away in A, but that would be the only thing that would be similar to what we're talking about here. Yeah, so you can see just the difference between these two trusses. This one has a supporting column, and this one, the supporting column is up against the wall, or actually embedded in the wall. And that's really how the only way you can tell the difference between the old trusses and the new trusses in this model. Okay, so that's option B. And I think you can get a sense of, how that new seating bowl arrangement would be a lot more exciting than the way it is set up now. So option C is kind of we'll say it's the more expensive option, because it is. And option C is the one where we really attempt to maximize the seating capacity of the building. And the way we do that is by adding additional seating on the north and south sides of the performance court. So in many respects, option C is very similar to option B. It has the same retail, the same locker rooms, the same new city hall space. It has the same addition on the east side as option B, but the big difference is that it now has an addition on the north and south side of the competition basketball court to create a more 360-degree arena-like seating bowl configuration. So you still get the same 3 tournament courts, so you still get the same 22,000 square foot event space. You still get the same concourse on both the east side and the west side. Let's go up to the next floor. This is the second level plan, so you still get the same wraparound concourse here and here, although we got to figure out, frankly, whether that cross aisle goes right through the seating or not. We haven't figured that out yet. And there's still a potential for having a club lounge in this corner, although it might not have a view into the event floor quite the same way as the other one did. That's one thing that you kind of give up in option C. You still keep the armory court, but you can see, and let's go to the next slide because that really shows it more dramatically. This is the spectator basketball layout now is kind of what I would say optimized for basketball, where you have really substantial seats in both the north and south end zones. You really have that sense of being completely surrounded by spectators with no gaps, and the seating capacity of option C is not surprisingly the largest of any of them at about. Well, that's not right. I think it's right at 4,900 seats, if I remember correctly. Yeah. For basketball, could be even more for that, more than that for a center stage concert, slightly less than that for an end stage concert. So this is, and then so the question becomes: is that addition on the south side intruding into the plaza you just created on 6th Street? And the answer is just watch. So let's go to our 3D model and show them how we did that. So what we're proposing is, let's just back out and see the whole volume. Okay, hang on a second while Jack switches layers here. So this is option C, and you can see how that volume of the additional seating does protrude above the plaza space, but it actually does not it doesn't compromise the park space. It actually creates a little shaded area that might be considered an amenity for the plaza space on the south side of the Corn Palace. So, Jack, let's kind of just zoom around that a little bit and, you know, kind of show them what it feels like, maybe get down at street level. And so the idea is that the ceiling of that projection would actually slope to follow the slope of the seating bowl. To open it up as much as possible, but you would still be able, you know, all the functions in the plaza area would all be exactly the same, with the only exception being that there would be 4 or 5 columns that would hold up this addition running parallel to the south face of the building. So that's kind of how we addressed the impingement of the south seating addition on the plaza, the 6th Street Plaza. It's not an issue on the north side because the only thing we're impinging on is buildings that are already there, and we've made sure that we preserve the Armory basketball court and not cut a corner out of that. Okay, so Jack, let's go back up and maybe show them the plan section version of this. There we go. So this is what it looks like. Let's come up top. There we go. So this is an idea of what it looks like in 3D. And so now we're kind of at the second level here. So we can see the second level concourse, the grand stair that goes down to the northeast lobby, the second level concourse on this side. And of course, you know, some of that existing gallery space could remain more or less as it is. And then the walkways that connect all around. You can see how we've preserved the Armory court by cutting out a little chunk of the seats here. But that's basically what that would look like. And so, you know, it gets very close to the 5,000 number. And one thing I will say about these seat counts is at this level, they're very imprecise. So every time we see you, the seat count number will be slightly different, but this will give you a general idea of where we're at. It's close to this. So.
Does any of it have permanent seating, or is it all bleachers?
Sorry?
Does any of it have seating like this, or is it all bleachers?
Yeah, a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because I failed to mention it. Telescoping seating can be literally anything you want. So it can be benches, it can be plastic benches, it can be metal benches, it can be self-rising armchairs, it can be plastic stadium seats, it can be upholstered auditorium seats, it can be leather chairs. I mean, it literally can be anything you want. The only variable there is cost, and obviously the, you know, upholstered auditorium seat costs more than a plastic stadium chair, but there's literally no limitation on what kind of seat those telescoping seats can be. So we have done other arenas that have very nice upholstered seats. You can also get the plastic stadium chairs with pads. So there's kind of like with premium seating, there's a wide range of options all the way from, basic plastic high school bleachers all the way up to really fancy upholstered chairs, and everything in between. And it's basically, at some point it becomes a price point decision of what am I comfortable paying for.
And I think you want to go to retractable fixed as well.
Yeah, so in this model, what we're saying is that these seats all here would be retractable. Everything above this cross aisle would be permanent fixed seating. And then in the north and south end zone, obviously the first X rows would be retractable, and then it would be fixed above that. So as to the question of the quality of the seat, it can literally be whatever you want it to be. So that's option C.
Stack seating pulled back.
Yeah, can we show them option C with the seating? Yeah, so there's the three tournament courts all side by side. Can you make that little chunk go away, or does that whole option go away then? Whoop, there we go. So you can see the 22,000 square foot event floor would look like this. Also, just to make the point, can you have spectators while you're doing a tournament? The answer is yes. The spectators could all be on the upper level. Now, obviously, if you're on this upper level, you're not going to have super great sidelines to the near court. The near court's going to be right below you and a little bit hard to see, but you can definitely have spectators up here. And, obviously, when you're in tournament mode, you're basically talking moms and dads, so it's not going to be huge numbers of spectators. But they can occupy this second level and look down and see the activities on the courts below. Okay, questions about option C before we jump to the next slide? Is this making sense to you, at least as far as what I've explained about it?
Before you jump to the next slide, we'll be able to talk about the ability to isolate visitors from a large-scale event. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about is the idea of, we mentioned several times the idea of permanent retail space for the Corn Palace. And let's go, Jack, let's go back to the PowerPoint and back up to the option C ground floor plan. There we go. So, this permanent retail space is very flexible in the sense that you can get to it off of Main Street. So it could be open when the entire rest of the Corn Palace is closed. You can also get to it off of the concourse, so it can be open when there's an event going on. It can be open to folks in the concourse to wander in and buy Corn Palace souvenirs or team merchandise or whatever during an event. And really the only variable there is, whether you lock this door or whether you lock that door, as far as whether it's a ticketed part of the venue or an unticketed part of the venue. But the point is that the permanent retail can be open 365 days a year, whether there's an event going on at the Corn Palace or not, which again, functionally should be a great advantage and financially should be a great advantage. Okay?
And I think there was one other probably important point, that it was not part of the original.
Can you come to the,
Sorry.
we do have a.
Yep. Not part of the original, not part of the original program, but that came out of the result of studying this facility, is that the first phase requires something to be done with City Hall. Each one of these options shows something at this level. Either we take in that option A, you take City Hall and you put it upstairs. Option B or C, we move City Hall north into the parking lot. So in any one of these options, to be able to create the necessary space for the Corn Palace to function, we had to relocate at least this ground floor of City Hall. And it basically, in a phasing process, almost has to come first. And then all of these are designed so that from the proscenium opening to the east, that portion can be remodeled before we have to do much at all to the interior of the City Hall. So you can have that addition almost completely done. We can have the existing City Hall space, and whatever gets added on in B or C, that can be accomplished or completed before we really get heavy into the interior of the City Hall, or of the Corn Palace.
Yeah.
So phasing, that's kind of how that will fit together for you.
And basically, with all these options, the Corn Palace will be functional the whole time.
Yeah, our intention would be that the Corn Palace remains in operation throughout the construction, recognizing that that will necessarily involve some compromises in functionality, like if we demolish the stage house, you're not going to have those retractable seats on the east side of the court, but you would still be able to use the existing seats on the west side of the court until the new seats on the east side were built, and then you could use those and tear down the west. So there would certainly be some functional compromises during construction, but our intention would be that the building could remain open throughout. Okay? Okay, if there aren't other questions, let's go ahead to the bad news part. What's this all going to cost? So these are 3 budget scenarios, and again, these are order of magnitude costs. You know, somebody asked me during the charrette how much this is going to cost, and I said somewhere between 10 and 100 million, and I was right. But these are still, you know, kind of order of magnitude estimates. So this is an educated professional guess, but not a detailed construction cost estimate. And what you see is a range of potential costs for option A, and you can see we've broken it down by structural. MEP refers to mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Architectural is kind of everything else, to get you to a total construction budget in option A of somewhere between $13 and $15 million. When you add project soft cost to that, which is design fees, FF&E, which refers to furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, which is like chairs and tables and stuff like that, and then a contingency, which is basically a fudge factor to account for unknowns. And believe me, on a remodel project, there are plenty of unknowns. So your contingency can never be big enough on a remodel project. Anyway, those 3 things factor into that 20% soft cost, which is added to the construction cost, which gets you to a cost range for option A of $15.3 to $18 million. Same scenario for option B gets you to a cost range of $30 to $36.6. And same scenario for option C gets you to a cost range of $36.6, which interestingly is the high end of option B, to $42.5. Yes?
Does that, these estimates include the new City Hall addition? Okay.
Yes, they do. For B and C, obviously, not for A.
But it would include the remodeling in A?
Yes.
Upstairs, right?
I think another important factor, too, is that the M, E, and P, we're going to have to do that anyway. I mean, that's something that needs to be done because it hasn't been done for so long.
Yeah, the point was made during one of our meetings that even if you decided not to do anything, you probably still need to spend $7 to $8.5 million on MEP repairs, basically, to keep the building as it is today running functionally. Because we heard, and you know, there's a lot more detail to go into about this if you want to go there, but we heard about the age of systems in this building as being way, way past their useful life, and essentially our estimates anticipate virtually all of the mechanical and electrical systems being replaced, you know, with maybe some minor exceptions, because of their age and obsolescence. So that's $7.5 or $8 million you would need to spend, even if you didn't do anything to the Corn Palace.
I think the youngest portion of our MEP is 25 years old, which is at its significant life cycle.
Yeah, you've gotten great mileage out of it, but I think it's time for a fresh start for a lot of that stuff.
Doug's got a lot of Band-Aids in his.
Options B and C, where did you, where are the Murals going to be? Because you're taking down the stage, you're taking them indoors. Like,
Jack, let's go back to the 3D models and talk about that. Maybe one of our cross-sectional models. So yeah, let's go to the vertical section. There we go. And push in, and yeah, okay. So let's get down close to eye level. So what you can see is, even though there's a whole lot of seating in this building, and let's go ahead and turn all the seats on. Yeah, that's great. Even though there's a whole lot of seating in this building, there's still a whole lot of wall in this building, and so, you know, virtually any of these vertical walls could become a corn mural. And you know, obviously there's a matching set of walls on the other side that could become a corn mural. So I think there's plenty of places in options B and C for corn murals. They just wouldn't be the current location around the proscenium arch of the stage.
I don't know the height and stuff, as big as what we got out there.
As big as what you have now, yes. But I want to point out they would not be the same murals that you have now. Those would, what I understand is, when those murals are dismantled, they are destroyed. So they would be new corn murals.
You can have the same picture, just new corn.
Right.
We go up there and glue everything back on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for a concert, the stage would be in the middle of the floor?
Well, there's actually a number of options around that, and we've talked about a few of them. And Jack, let's go back to the plan section just to chat about that for a minute. And this would be essentially the same for option B and C. Concerts in arenas, most of them are what we call end stage concerts, which means they're at under, you know, essentially where one of the baskets is on a basketball court. And so in this case, if you did an end stage concert, what you would probably do is build the stage out right where these seats are at the north end of the spectator court, which is also close to the loading dock, it's close to back of house, it's close to the dressing rooms. It would make a very functional layout for talent to, you know, to approach the stage and be able to secure that. And you'd lose very few seats, because you'd really only lose this one north bank of seats, and you'd be able to keep all these other seats plus another 1,000 seats on the floor. So you get a very substantial seat count that way. The other thing you could do, the two other things you could do, a center stage concert where they set the stage right in the middle of the performance court is the one that maximizes seat count. So we could get like 5,100 seats for a center stage concert. Or you could do a side stage concert, which is actually an idea that I kind of like, where you back up the west bank of seats and put the stage at the west side of the basketball court, and then you have these two wings and this big block of seats looking directly at the stage, as well as you still get your 1,000 floor seats. They're just facing east instead of facing north. So there's at least 3 ways to do it, all of which have their pros and cons, but I think it can be made. The other thing that's nice about that is, once you get rid of the stage house, you actually have that flexibility to put the stage here, here, or here, which you don't have now, because the stage is a temporary thing that's built on, you know, staging platforms, and you can build it wherever you want to build it. And we're going to also reinforce the structural grid so that we can hang lights from anywhere in the building to light these shows. So we'll have a tremendous amount of flexibility, plus the ability to access the rafters, because we got rid of the acoustical ceiling, will make rigging a show much easier and faster.
So we've talked, Doug's kind of keeping his eye out, regardless if we do anything, of a portable stage. So we could utilize it outside, and then if we end up doing any of this, then we could also use it inside. So that was the intent, is when the permanent stage is gone, but we've got a temporary, portable, I should say, and then we could use it outside in our courtyard or inside possibly.
These projected budget dollars, is that for this year, 2022, or is that on beyond?
These numbers are in 2022 dollars, so if we assume a midpoint of construction in, mid-2023 or mid-2024, we'd need to escalate those dollars to those years.
David, the access to the freight elevator between A, B, and C.
Oh, yeah.
Minor point, but
Let's go back to one of the floor plan drawings. Yeah, this is a relatively minor point, but one of the crazy things about the current building is that to get stuff from the freight elevator to the event floor, you actually have to go outside. But in this scenario, and really all three scenarios, well, maybe not A, B and C, we're enclosing access to the freight elevator, which is right here, so that you can get from the basement to the freight elevator to the event floor without having to go outside. So another functional improvement.
I know, David, that these three options are for us to hammer around, but if you had to make a recommendation, you and Robin, what would you'd say, I strongly suggest you do this or that? Because if you do, if you opt for A, 10 years from now, you're going to be sorry, from your experience.
Well, I think you just gave my answer for me. I think that I think choosing between B and C is basically a question of, what's your appetite for budget, because C costs more than B. But my recommendation to you is that either B or C would be a substantial upgrade to the Corn Palace in terms of its capacity, in terms of its functionality, and I think, frankly, in terms of its financial performance, where A may not give you that level of improvement.
The building's 100 years old now. We want to build it for another 100 years. I mean, we want this to be done so it's good for close to another 100 years beyond this. So.
And I would reinforce what David was just saying. If you take it in B and C, both of those have a main competition court that is always exposed. It doesn't have cross courts. You'll have 4 courts instead of essentially 2 under option A. You meet the 5,000, right in that 4,000 or 5,000 seat capacity. I think the cost per seat, and I didn't run this, I should have, between B and C is roughly the same cost per seat. And you have one shot at this. So while David was thinking which one was he going to say, I was behind kind of saying I'd probably lean towards C. It's more money. But again, you have the one shot.
I think another thing we realize too is a lot of people laugh at the Corn Palace to live in town because they see it every day and don't realize it brings over 300,000 people to town, which that's a lot of money that comes into town. And without the Corn Palace, that's 300,000 people plus that we would never get. We got to keep the building up, I think.
So if I may, I have a question for the council, which is, Stephanie mentioned this is a draft report. We're here to get your input, and we certainly appreciate the questions that you've asked. I would just ask the council, is there anything that you've heard or seen tonight that suggests we need to go back to the drawing board or reinvestigate or relook at, something that you wish we had looked at that we didn't?
In your opinion, by losing the north parking lot, by adding City Hall going that way, do we have adequate parking in the downtown walkable access to the Corn Palace, or is that going to be an issue?
Well, the answer to both those questions is yes. You do have adequate parking downtown for the Corn Palace, even in its expanded condition. Getting rid of that north parking lot means that 20 or 30 people are going to have to walk a little farther to get to the Corn Palace. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a trivial difference. I think, the issue is getting people to, and I understand, I'm a Midwesterner just like you are, and I want to park by the front door too. Everybody wants to park by the front door, but with major downtown buildings like this, people are used to parking a block or two away and walking, especially if there's a sold-out event. So it's not going to, people will be inconvenienced to a tiny degree, but I don't think it's anything that's going to cause a revolt.
And if we have another entrance to the back,
right,
they'll probably walk in less.
If you go with option B or C, you get this new northeast entrance that actually would be more convenient to the parking you already have.
And you'd still keep Lawler Street open?
Yeah, we don't think, the possibility of closing Lawler was tossed out during the charrette, and we considered it, but frankly, we think that all this construction can be accomplished within the curb lines of the block you already have, and so if we don't need to close Lawler, why close it?
I guess one thing that I hadn't really thought about till now, if you do leave Lawler open, you'd always have the ability to maybe close it during events for handicap parking, since you would be losing that on the north lot.
Sure, you could always close it on a temporary basis.
We did something similar to that with the Corn Palace Plaza parking lot for handicap for another event.
There's mostly, Lawler Street has a lot of bus parking there.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to get your spectators and your fans in there and players in.
Well, one of the things we talked about, and Jack, can you just come up top for a sec? This area on the north side where we said is the loading dock is also a place where team buses can park for visiting teams. So they can actually have secure bus parking there in the loading dock and get the teams in and out of there very efficiently and in a very secure way.
I was just curious if we had people in the audience, if they had any questions out there to ask you.
I didn't hear anything about the handicap accessibility.
Yeah, let me speak to that. This is a concept. Oh, yeah, sorry. The question was about handicap accessibility and have we considered that? And the answer is yes. This is a concept study, so it's not a detailed architectural design, and when we get to a detailed architectural design, you will see ADA viewing platforms all around that second level concourse that we were talking about. We have already shown elevators in the plan on both the east and west sides of the building to get passengers up to the second level, but our firm's reputation is based on being responsible with respect to ADA and spectator venues, so we're very, very conscious of that, and we're not at that level of detail yet, but we will get there for sure. Sir, you had a question?
What about agricultural events? Can you handle a rodeo in that, or horse shows, or?
Yeah, so we mentioned at the outset, the question was, what about agricultural events?
Remember, we're online, too.
Can we do a rodeo or horse show? And the answer is yes. You'll recall that at the outset of our presentation, we talked about flexibility of event types. And so making sure that we have good loading, making sure that we have good drive-on access, that there would actually be in that loading dock area, there would be room for cattle chutes and things like that. And it's possible, although I know it's operationally challenging, it's possible to bring footy mix in so that you can do, horse events and things like that. It creates a lot of cleanup issues, but that's an operational problem at that point. So yeah, it can absolutely be, and the event floor itself, remember, is 22,000 square feet. So depending on how big of a rodeo you want to do, we can do, a very substantial arena space for those kinds of events.
In the 40s and 50s, they had purebred bull sales in the Corn Belt, and were successful at that time. And that relates back to your, what was it, 1923 picture.
Mm-hmm.
The people
had access, to things like that.
Yeah, the point was made that there were purebred bull sales in the Corn Palace back in the day, and that would certainly be possible in this venue.
We're certainly open to doing that again.
I guess one of the comments that came up repeatedly throughout the focus groups as well as the public meeting and the committee meetings is you were calling it the elephant door.
Yeah.
If you have a circus, where do you bring the elephant in? So I think they spent a lot of time talking about that with everyone.
Right. Every arena has to have an elephant door, which is the biggest door in the building that you can bring in fire trucks and sailboats and whatever else you need to bring in.
One of the goals we want is to bring in more shows like farm shows and hunting and fishing shows and those kinds of things. And we just don't have the floor space today. But we believe we would with this 22,000 square feet.
How about the overhead of more doors, more ticket takers, more concession stands, as far as overhead, yearly overhead?
Well, Doug's more of an operations expert than I am, but as the size of the venue increases, obviously you're going to need a few more ticket scanners to get the folks in. But those numbers are really dependent on the event type. And if it's a DWU basketball game, Doug will have a good idea of how many ticket scanners he's going to need for that event versus a sold-out concert. But it really becomes just mathematics at some point. We use back in the turnstile days, we used to use a rule of thumb of 1,500 people per turnstile. So if you were designing a 15,000-seat arena, you needed to have at least 10 turnstiles to get into that building. We're not in the turnstile era anymore, but I think the ticket scanning function is analogous, and so I'm sure Doug knows what those ratios are.
Robin, have you touched base on being able to have it open to tourists on one side and an event on the other and being able to separate those spaces? Have you touched on that?
Yes, we have.
Want to read it?
Have we touched base on the ability to have spectators to the large event and then the open to tourists on the other side of the building? We have in options, especially B and C, we have those two separate entrances. So it's really easy to keep the west side entrance open for tourists and the other entrance on the northeast side open for spectators. David had also talked about the ability to isolate the shops in that portion of the building at any given time, so that can always be open. It could be open 24/7. And what you were talking about, David, about the locks, so you can lock that door or open that door between the shop and the rest of the Corn Palace. So it does allow for traffic flow. You could close off the west concourse to tourists and leave the main event floor and the east concourse open at any given time. So there's flexibility built into any one of those options. We had comment didn't come up. Which one is easier or harder to remodel? And actually, we kind of think A is the hardest one because you're on top of yourself. So right away when we start remodeling, something's down. And we can still do that in phases, but we start tearing into your existing facility right away.
Robin, on B and C, City Hall, the new addition for City Hall,
Yes.
am I reading this right, that it's a total of 25,000 square feet that you would be adding? It would be two-story?
Right.
So it would tie into, basically, make it look aesthetically nice and
Correct.
belong in this area. Maybe, do you want to just touch on that?
Correct. So what we have is the existing Corn Palace. We want to keep that character. And we've talked about, and I'm backing up a little bit on your question, but we want to keep the
Jack, let's
character.
come around to the Main Street side and just show them the massing on that.
Yep. So the character of the existing Corn Palace on Main Street stays the same. Across the south side, it remains the same, except for in option C where we project out. So there was discussion, and I'm going to back up and add more maybe character to this or more flavor to this question. Can you do the murals all the way around the Corn Palace? This doubles the amount of exterior wall space B and C do that you could do Corn Palaces.
Just what you want to hear, right, Doug?
So Internally, we've been playing, is there a way to make that more of a permanent, some kind of a corn character wall? There are people that do engravings in brick that'll allow you to get maybe a permanent mural, and you'll never have to change it. We don't have the solution to that yet, but we're thinking, how do we not add to that exterior load for you, but how do we carry the character of the existing Corn Palace around the expanded Corn Palace? Then we get back to the existing City Hall. That's a beautiful Art Deco building. We think we want to get it back to its character. If you look in the hallway, there's some photographs of that and the way the windows work in the corner in the mayor's office, where apparently everybody could stand around and protest and holler at you in the window. So they got blocked off at one time. We'd like to put the character of that back. And then headed to the north, it doesn't make sense architecturally to step down to one floor. It just doesn't. You really need one floor, but then that gives you no expansion space. So we think with the second floor, you have options for leasable space, probably originally, and as the city grows, you may grow into that second level.
And you would also need to consider, there's quite a bit of space on the second floor of City Hall right now that's being used for storage. So if that's being converted to event space, you're going to need to replace that. And then the other discussions council has had over the past 8 years now is, you know, we looked at what future needs were for the building as well. We've added staff into here, and we've taken away multi-use space. So we've also talked about that second floor might be good for flexible use space if they were going to have some kind of, I don't know, group in the Corn Palace that they need meeting space adjacent to it or something like that as well.
Correct.
And Mark Robin, to the extent that there are flexible meeting rooms in the new City Hall, those flexible meeting rooms could also be a revenue source for the Corn Palace. So there's a potential to kind of, you know, create a win-win scenario there.
Anything else?
Those are great questions.
If we don't have any more questions, then I guess we'll adjourn the meeting.
Maybe, Bob, do you want to maybe just, obviously we want this to sink in, we need some community input. You have any idea what our next steps should be? Stephanie,
Or like a timeline on our final.
Yeah, and I know,
report?
Stephanie, you're going to be working on, obviously, numbers to kind of know where we're at. We all know we've got a lake that we need to address, and obviously, two very large projects, so we'll just have to get some input and slowly try to work through this and see if it makes sense.
Well, I think we'll get our final report from these gentlemen, and then what we'll need to do is obviously have some discussions between council and figure out what, if we want to, if anything, we want to do. You know, the idea here is we want to bring more things to Mitchell to help boost our economy, especially in the off season when we don't have the 300,000 visitors stopping by to see the Corn Palace, which would be somewhere like end of September through the 1st of May. And this would allow us to have functions in there that would do that, bring in trade shows, hunting, fishing shows, farm shows, which would be, and what better place? I mean, Corn Palace is ideal for a farm show. It's obviously agriculture based. So, again, we have to look at how we would go about getting the dollars to do this. You know, is there a way to go to private entities and maybe get donations to do it? There's a lot of work to it. It's, you know, a lot of pieces of this puzzle to put together. So what we'll have to do is have those discussions and start looking at those various options and see which direction we can go.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
In the form of a final report, would you prefer to have the 3 options, or do you want it focused to one option? So we would still have the process, how we got to here, and it gets to maybe how you present it to the city and develop from here.
Well, I think option A is really no good to us.
That's just what I was going to say.
So we're down to 2.
Spent a lot of,
So is there a way to look at option B with, say, well, as I'm used to, alternate to add the wings?
I would discourage that.
Okay.
Simply from the point of view that to say we're doing option B with an add alternate for the north and south seating is like, that's going to change so many things that your architects, which is us, would basically end up drawing the building twice.
So if we go with option C, we could always parry it back to option B.
Yeah, the way architecture works is the farther into a project you get, the more expensive it is to make changes. But at this stage, it's real easy to whack something off or add it on. The farther into the project we get, the more difficult it becomes to do that.
Question,
Sorry.
how much of the, what I'll call the north addition of B and C is exactly the same? The loading dock, city hall,
Most of it.
souvenirs,
The only difference in that north
is where it
addition
comes into the armory?
is the
part?
degree to which that seating wing intrudes into it. But apart from that, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
Dan, can I go back to your comment on which, if you show all three options or just one or two or three? Keep in mind that if this is your final report, I don't know if you're wanting the public to be able to see what three options were considered and why. If you're not having that in the final report, that might not be available to everybody else that hasn't been involved.
True.
Maybe this is a question for David, but because maybe you've seen more of this, but for fundraising purposes or gaining community support, is it best to have one final solution, this is what we want, or do you see that having options on the table is a better option?
Well, I would say for this study and the scope of work that we've accomplished to this point, it's perfectly fine to have three options. At some point, the city is going to have to land on on an option and say, we want to do this one. And at that point, what we would do is, pull out the renderings and the views and the pretty pictures of that option, and you could publicize the heck out of it. But I think for the purposes of this study, I don't see any drawback to having three options in the document.
Right, that's what I was thinking. If council ultimately decides to move forward with option C or 3 or whatever number we're on, you're going to be able to say, this is what we're doing and why. But
Yeah.
showing the work that led up to where you are isn't necessarily bad either, because that comparison of what you get from A to B or B to C is telling too. I mean, seeing that $5 to $6 million HVAC mechanical upgrade costs, some of those other things that would be in all three options.
Mm-hmm.
What was the seating capacity in B compared to C?
For
What you're asking then-
basketball, B is 4,200 and C is 4,900.
No, I couldn't find it.
I guess one thing that I would maybe suggest as a change in the report is where you're showing lease space. To me, it would make more sense to call it like flexible use space or something
Okay.
like that, because otherwise it kind of looks like you're building on to lease it out instead of like that it would be used by the city. Yeah. Yeah, on one of the pages there, I saw it listed as lease space. Yeah.
We can fix that.
So, David, I was going to ask one more question on the type of events. We host events that are just a few hundred people, and we host events that hopefully will be up to maximize the capacity. Do you normally see in this type of an arena where you curtain off certain areas, or what suggestion would you have with that? So it doesn't look like you bring in 300 fans, for the B basketball game, and then all of a sudden it looks like you're in this huge facility.
Yeah, I would actually recommend that as part of the FF&E package for this building that we include some blackout drapes that would curtain off the upper part of the seating bowl for a spectator event where you only expected to, see like maybe 1,200 spectators or something. That way, it does create a more intimate environment, and you don't have this cavernous feeling of a lot of empty seats.
I think that's what the Denny does over there.
Yeah,
They block
Safer
them.
does that. For wrestling, the first 2 days, they'll block off the upper seats and everybody sits low. And then when they get the big crowd for the finals, it's all open.
They do it with concerts sometimes too, even.
Do they?
Yeah.
I've never been to a
Yeah.
concert there hasn't been full.
Yeah, those kind of draping systems are very common in arenas and fairly easy to deploy.
Anything else?
Thank you, Dave and Robin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.